After 3 prison sentences, a total of 11 years in jail, the Malaysian opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim has been released on a royal pardon. Mr Anwar started the opposition movement, which has just defeated the former ruling party in Malaysia for the first time in the country's history. The shock election victory followed a reconciliation between Mr Anwar and his former persecutor Mahathir Mohamad, the veteran Malaysian leader who is now the newly elected Prime Minister at the age of 92. David Campanale has this report, which contains some flashing images.
After a week of extraordinary events in Malaysia, this was one of the most anticipated moments of the country's new era. Anwar Ibrahim, the man whose political downfall 20 years ago sparked off the reformist movement, has his freedom. He'd spent 2 periods in jail for his opposition, but his movement has just triumphed at the polls. Flanked by his wife, he praised the people of Malaysia.
Now there's a new dawn for Malaysia. I must thank the people of Malaysia. Malays, Chinese, Indians, Kadazan, Iban, the entire spectrum of Malaysians, regardless of race and religion, who stood by the principles of democracy and freedom.
The newly elected Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, once Mr Anwar's mentor, sought a royal pardon which has now been granted. Anwar's release is the result of a once unthinkable reconciliation between 2 men, which helped end the 60-year-long monopoly and power of their old party. Back in the 1990s, they were political allies, serving as Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister respectively. But Mr Anwar was sacked in 1998 after falling out and was jailed a year later for abuse of power. In 2000, he was convicted of what he says were trumped-up charges of sodomy and given an additional 9-year jail term. Anwar says he's now forgiven Mr Mahathir and stressed he would give full support to the new government, though not immediately be part of it. For his part, Dr Mahathir, now in his 90s, has promised to step aside for Anwar Ibrahim to become Prime Minister within 2 years. How these 2 strong-willed former rivals work together will both fascinate Malaysians and to a large extent dictate how well the political transformation in their country proceeds. David Campanale, BBC News.
Well, let's speak to our Southeast Asia correspondent Jonathan Head, who's outside the house of Anwar Ibrahim in KL, Kuala Lumpur. You've spoken to him. Come to that in a minute. I mean, the speed of this, Jonathan, is blistering, isn't it?
It is. Well, it's inevitable, really. I mean, nothing like this has happened. There's an agenda now confronting the new government that they just didn't expect they'd be in a position to implement. It's been fascinating. I'm actually not at Anwar Ibrahim's house now. I've now come down to a field where there's going to be a big celebration, a welcome celebration for him starting in an hour or two's time. And he'll come down here then. But the scenes at his house were fascinating. You had all the members of his coalition on the very day that he has been freed and been able to come home, rushing in there to talk about the important business of putting together a government and all the other huge agendas they've got to deal with, fixing Malaysia's institutions, which have been corrupted and politicised in the 60-year-long rule of the very party, of course, that Mr Anwar and many of them were once members. So it is incredible watching it. It is literally a real-time political transition. Mr Anwar himself, I have to say, he's seeing a lot of people. He's very busy. He sounded a little tired. He sounded like somebody who genuinely means it when he said he's not going to jump right in. He will have a big say right now, I think, on cabinet positions. There's a lot of jostling for that. But after that, he does look like somebody who wants a bit of a break and perhaps is content. And he said, you know, he does now trust Mahathir Mohamad, which is extraordinary, think of their personal animosity. And he is ready to wait, to stand aside, let Dr Mahathir be Prime Minister, and within those 2 years, as agreed, eventually take up the reins.
Can Anwar, though, unite all the opposition? Is he the only man who can do that?
Well, that's quite interesting. That is certainly always been true. I mean, when he was jailed for a second time in 2015, the opposition movement that he'd pulled together then fell apart. But Mahathir Mohamad, extraordinary at his age, has probably been as crucial, possibly more so, in bringing this group together. And what people inside are telling me is that Dr Mahathir is showing extraordinary skill and experience in navigating this unprecedented territory for Malaysia, both the very tense few hours after the election results came in when it wasn't clear that the former ruling party would honour them, and in managing the transition now. Mahathir Mohamad, believe it or not, is probably more important right now even than Anwar Ibrahim. But of course Anwar is the icon of opposition, the man who's been in prison, the martyr. Seeing him free and having him back as a part of this opposition movement is symbolically so important for this country.
Okay, Jonathan Head with the very latest. Thanks very much indeed.